For 7 months, the poor waitress at Crossroads Diner quietly left food for the mute boy who lingered outside, watching through windows with haunted eyes. Nobody noticed her small acts of kindness, a sandwich wrapped in napkins, soup on cold days, eventually a silent companionship at the corner booth during her breaks. The town dismissed them both, a forgotten woman and a strange, silent child. Then came the Tuesday when 4 identical black SUVs with government plates surrounded the diner. Armed agents in tactical gear secured exits while suited officials entered with military precision. Their leader scanned the room, ignoring the wealthy and powerful locals until her gaze settled on the waitress no one had truly seen for years. From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If you believe in the power of unrecognized kindness, we invite you to join our community and subscribe. The Crossroads Diner stood at the literal and figurative intersection of Grayson Falls, a once thriving manufacturing town, now lined with more empty storefronts than open businesses. Its faded 1950s facade and flickering neon, "Open 24 hours" sign had become one of the few constants in a community defined by economic uncertainty. Inside, the morning rush unfolded with clockwork precision. Ren Adler moved between tables with graceful efficiency, her movements so familiar they'd become nearly invisible to the regular patrons. At 36, her dark hair was always neatly secured in a practical bun, her diner uniform pressed despite its age, her quiet competence a stark contrast to the boisterous conversations swirling around her. "Coffee, black, 2 sugars," she said, placing the mug in front of Councilman Thaddeus Warwick without him needing to order. He barely glanced up from his newspaper, not bothering to acknowledge her presence. "I'm telling you, these assistance programs are bleeding the town dry," Warwick announced to his breakfast companions, his voice carrying deliberately through the diner. "People need to take responsibility, not handouts." Ren refilled his coffee without comment, though something flickered briefly in her gray-green eyes. Not anger, but a deeper understanding that seemed at odds with her position, carrying plates of eggs and toast. At the corner booth, Millicent Devereaux held court with her usual morning gathering of 4 women, who collectively functioned as the town's unofficial information network. Their conversation paused as Ren approached with their orders. "Western omelet, dry toast," Ren said, placing the plate before Millicent, who was mid-sentence discussing someone's financial troubles. "Thank you, dear," Millicent replied with the condescending tone reserved for service workers. Once Ren moved away, she continued in a theatrical whisper. "As I was saying, I just wonder about someone who stays in a place like this for years when they could clearly do better elsewhere. Must be some kind of trouble in her past." The others nodded sagely, though none had ever bothered to learn anything about the waitress who had served them faithfully for 7 years. In the kitchen, Huxley Barton, the diner's owner, worked the grill with practiced movements that matched his gruff exterior. At 58, with salt and pepper hair and forearms mapped with old burn scars, he maintained the perfect balance between professional distance and fairness with his staff. "Order up," he called, sliding plates toward Ren. As she collected them, he added quietly, "Schedules posted. Gave you Tuesday morning off like you asked." "Thanks, Huxley," she replied, her voice carrying a soft cadence that held no regional accent, another subtle difference that separated her from most Grayson Falls natives. The lunch shift brought a different crowd, factory workers from the town's last operational manufacturing plant, elderly couples stretching fixed incomes with the affordable lunch special, and the occasional traveler passing through on the interstate that had long since diverted most traffic away from the town center. It was during this predictable rhythm that the pattern changed for the first time. A small figure appeared outside the diner's large windows, a boy, perhaps 10 years old, wearing a coat several sizes too large. He didn't enter or beg, just stood watching with an intensity unusual for a child his age. "That weird kid is back," remarked Delia, the other afternoon waitress. "Someone should call social services or something. He gives me the creeps just standing there." Ren glanced toward the window. "He's just a child," she said quietly, the first personal opinion many of her co-workers had heard her express. "A mute one," Delia added. "Juniper from the pharmacy tried talking to him once. He doesn't speak at all, just stares." During her afternoon break, when most staff slipped out back to smoke or check their phones, Ren carefully wrapped the untouched half of a turkey sandwich that would otherwise be thrown away. She stepped outside through the kitchen exit, placed the food near the dumpster where the boy had been seen lingering, and then retreated inside without fanfare. The next day the sandwich was gone, and the boy returned to his watching place. This subtle dance continued for weeks, food left discreetly, the boy watching from a careful distance, until the first truly cold day of autumn, when sleet pelted the windows and the boy appeared in the same inadequate coat, now visibly shivering. Wren finished serving her section, then approached Huxley at the grill. "I'm taking my break now," she said, "and I'd like to use my employee meal." Huxley glanced toward the window, then back at Wren. Their eyes met in a moment of understanding. "Employee meal includes soup and a side," he replied, already ladling chicken noodle into a bowl. "Bread's fresh today, too." Minutes later, Wren opened the diner's front door and gestured to the boy. After a hesitation that spoke volumes about learned caution, he followed her inside to a corner booth, partially hidden from the main dining area. "You don't have to talk," she said, placing the soup before him. "But you do need to warm up." The boy's eyes, intelligent and wary beyond his years, studied her face as if searching for deception. Finding none, he began to eat with the measured pace of someone accustomed to making food last. Millicent Devereaux, returning from the restroom, stopped short at the sight. Her eyes narrowed as she took in the scene, then deliberately changed her route back to her table to pass by their booth. "Well now," she said with artificial sweetness, "isn't this charitable, taking in strays during work hours?" Wren's expression remained neutral. "Just sharing my break with a friend," she replied, the simple dignity in her voice making Millicent's comment sound suddenly petty. Flustered by the response, Millicent retreated, but not before casting another judgmental glance at the boy's worn clothing and unwashed hair. The boy, whom Wren would eventually learn was named Larkin Moreau, continued eating without reaction, though his eyes tracked Millicent's departure with the hyper-awareness of someone accustomed to monitoring threats. This became their routine, Larkin appearing during Wren's afternoon shifts, Wren sharing her break and her employee meal in the corner booth. She never pressured him to speak, instead filling the silence with gentle observations about inconsequential things. The changing leaves, the quirky customers, the weather forecast. He listened with unwavering attention, occasionally responding with nods or hand gestures, sometimes drawing intricate pictures on napkins with pens Wren provided. In her locker at the end of each shift, Wren carefully divided her tips into 3 labeled mason jars: Mom's hospice care, rent, and utilities. The jars were never full enough, the distribution always requiring careful calculation. Yet sometimes, a small bill would find its way into a 4th jar, unmarked but dedicated to small necessities that would appear for Larkin: a warmer hat, a proper scarf, new gloves when the weather turned truly cold. "You know you can't save everyone, right?" Huxley commented one evening as he watched her counting quarters into the hospice jar. Wren's hands paused briefly. "I'm not trying to save everyone," she replied, "just the ones right in front of me." As winter settled over Grayson Falls with bitter determination, the diner became even more central to the town's daily life, one of the few places with reliable heating and affordable food. Councilman Warwick now held informal office hours from his regular booth, loudly discussing budget cuts between bites of meatloaf. "The community center will have to reduce hours," he announced to his associates one afternoon. "Can't justify heating the place with so few people using it." From nearby, where she was refilling salt, shakers, Wren spoke without looking up. "The center's at capacity every afternoon, with children whose parents work second shift at the factory." The table fell silent, startled by commentary from someone they'd long considered part of the furniture, rather than a participant in town matters. Warwick recovered quickly. "Well, perhaps their parents should arrange better child care," he replied dismissively before turning back to his companions. Later that same week, during a particularly busy lunch service, the diner's ancient television, usually tuned to weather or local news, broadcast a breaking story about an incident at a government research laboratory 2 states away. The report mentioned a fire, 2 fatalities, and no public safety concerns. Only Wren noticed how Larkin, sitting quietly in his usual booth, suddenly froze. His eyes locked on the screen with such intensity that she paused mid-order to observe his reaction. When his hands began to tremble, she smoothly moved to adjust the television's volume downward and changed the channel under the pretense of checking the weather forecast. That afternoon, Larkin's drawings changed, Instead of the usual nature scenes or abstract patterns, he sketched what appeared to be a building with unusual precision, complete with details like security cameras and badge readers on doors. Wren studied the drawing without comment, though something in her expression shifted almost imperceptibly. A sharpening of focus, a subtle calculation behind her eyes that seemed incongruous with her waitress persona. When Larkin left that evening, Wren carefully folded the drawing and placed it in her pocket rather than leaving it behind like his previous artwork. The following day brought new faces to the Crossroads Diner, a man and woman in business attire too formal for Grayson Falls, with the carefully neutral expressions of people trying to blend in while fundamentally not belonging. Just passing through, the woman explained with a practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes. Though we might stay a day or two. Quiet town you have here. Very quiet, Wren agreed, setting down their menus. Not many young families, I imagine? The man asked casually. We're considering a move from the city, wondering about the school system. Wren's expression remained pleasantly blank. Couldn't say. I just served the food. Their questions continued through the meal, casual inquiries about local children, after-school activities, whether Wren had noticed any new families or unusual visitors. With each question, Wren's responses became more minimal while maintaining a perfect politeness. After they left, Huxley watched from the grill as Wren cleared their table. Those two seemed mighty interested in local kids, he observed. Yes, Wren replied simply, but her movements had become more deliberate, her attention more focused on the diner's entrances and exits. When Larkin appeared at his usual time, she intercepted him before he reached the door, guiding him instead to the kitchen entrance and then to his usual booth via a route that kept him out of view from the parking lot. That evening, after closing, Huxley discovered Wren using the diner's rarely touched landline rather than her cell phone. She spoke in low, precise tones that carried a professional authority entirely absent from her typical soft-spoken service demeanor. Confirmed sighting, she was saying. Standard preliminary questioning pattern. No, I don't believe I've been compromised, but the timeline has accelerated. A pause. Understood, maintaining position until further notice. She replaced the receiver and turned to find Huxley watching from the doorway. They regarded each other in silence for a long moment. You're not just a waitress, he finally said. Not a question. I am exactly what I appear to be, she replied. A woman doing her job. And the boy? Wren's composed expression flickered briefly, revealing a depth of concern she typically kept hidden. Someone who needs help but doesn't trust easily. For good reason. Huxley nodded slowly. Your secret, whatever it is safe with me. But Wren, he added, his gruff voice softening, be careful. This town needs you more than you might think. The pattern continued for another week, Larkin appearing daily, the strangers in business attire, occasionally returning for meals, Wren maintaining her careful, unobtrusive routine while keeping the boy within her sightline whenever possible. Then came the Tuesday when everything changed. The morning began with unremarkable routine. The usual breakfast crowd filtered in as Grayson Falls reluctantly stirred to life under heavy gray skies that promised snow by afternoon. Wren moved between tables with practiced efficiency, her mind partially occupied with concern for Larkin, who had seemed increasingly agitated during his visits over the past few days. Millicent and her gossip circle occupied their usual booth, their conversation turning to their favorite topic, other people's business. I'm telling you, Millicent said, lowering her voice to an exaggerated whisper as Wren approached with coffee refills. Someone should report that situation. A child clearly neglected, possibly even homeless. And our waitress playing social worker instead of calling proper authorities. I heard she's giving him food off the menu, added Belinda Sawyer, the postmaster's wife. Huxley must be losing money on her charity cases. Perhaps she sees something of herself in him, suggested Eleanor Finch with practiced concern. You know she never speaks about her past. For all we know, she was in a similar situation once. The women fell silent as Wren reached their table, their expressions shifting to artificial pleasantness. She refilled their cups without comment, her face revealing nothing of what she might have overheard. Thank you, dear, Millicent said with exaggerated kindness. This weather is turning dreadful, isn't it? I do hope everyone finds proper shelter today. The emphasis on proper shelter wasn't subtle, but Wren merely nodded politely before moving to her next table. Near the window, Councilman Warwick was engaged in what appeared to be an uncomfortable conversation with Huxley. Their voices remained low, but their body language suggested tension. "All I'm saying," Warwick was explaining as Wren approached, "is that the appearance of your establishment affects the entire downtown image. Certain elements could discourage the kind of revitalization investors look for." "Certain elements," Huxley repeated flatly. "You mean a hungry kid?" Warwick's expression tightened. "I mean the obvious signs of vagrancy and neglect that suggest deeper community problems. It creates an impression that Grayson Falls can't manage its social issues properly." "Sounds like managing social issues is exactly your job description, Councilman," Huxley replied. "Indeed," Warwick acknowledged with a thin smile, "which is why I've already had a discussion with Family Services about conducting wellness checks on unattended minors in the downtown area." At this, Wren paused in her approach, coffee pot still in hand. Something flickered across her features, not panic, but a rapid calculation that seemed oddly strategic for a diner waitress. "Your usual councilman?" she asked, her voice betraying nothing of what she might have overheard. "Yes, thank you, Wren," he replied with sudden formality, as if remembering her name required conscious effort. The morning progressed with the comfortable predictability that defined the Crossroads Diner until precisely 11:42 a.m., when routine shattered like fine china on concrete. The first sign was subtle, a momentary lull in conversation as several customers glanced toward the windows. Outside, a black SUV with tinted windows and government plates had pulled directly in front of the diner. Before anyone could comment, a second identical vehicle arrived, then a third and fourth, each positioning with military precision to form a perimeter around the building's entrance. The diner fell completely silent as the SUV's doors opened simultaneously. Men and women in tactical gear emerged from two vehicles, taking positions that strategically covered all approaches to the diner. From the lead SUV, a woman emerged, tall, immaculately dressed in a charcoal suit that couldn't quite disguise her athletic build. Her dark hair was pulled back severely, her expression one of focused authority. Two similarly dressed men flanked her as she approached the diner's entrance. Inside, the customers watched with expressions ranging from curiosity to alarm. Millicent's gossip circle huddled closer together, their whispers now urgent and speculative. Councilman Warwick straightened in his seat, adjusting his tie as if preparing to assert his local authority. Only Wren maintained her composure completely, though her positioning had subtly shifted. She now stood where she could observe both the entrance and the kitchen exit, her body still but alert in a way that suggested readiness rather than fear. The bell above the door chimed as the woman entered, followed by her two colleagues. The sound seemed inappropriately cheerful given the tension that now filled the space. "Good morning," the woman said, her voice carrying clearly through the silent diner. "I'm Assistant Director Indira Kapoor, Federal Bureau of Investigation." She scanned the room with practiced efficiency before continuing. "We're looking for a child who may have been seen in this area. Male, approximately 10 years old, brown hair, hasn't spoken since witnessing a traumatic incident 3 weeks ago." Millicent immediately turned toward Wren, her expression a mixture of vindication and alarm. Others followed her gaze, the collective attention of the diner shifting to the waitress who had been invisible to them for years. Assistant Director Kapoor followed their gaze, her eyes settling on Wren with sudden intensity. For a moment, the two women regarded each other across the diner, an assessment that felt more like recognition than introduction. "The boy," Kapoor said, addressing Wren directly now. "Is he here?" Before Wren could respond, the kitchen door swung open and Larkin appeared, drawn by the unusual silence in the normally bustling diner. He froze when he saw the officials, his eyes widening with unmistakable fear. Wren moved smoothly to stand beside him, a subtle but clear protective gesture. "He's here," she confirmed, her voice calm, but carrying a new authority that made several customers look at her with sudden confusion. "But I think you already knew that, Director Kapoor." Kapoor's professional mask slipped for just a moment, revealing genuine surprise. "You know who I am. I make it my business to recognize faces in my field," Wren replied evenly, "particularly those who might appear in my diner looking for lost children." The exchange created a ripple of confusion among the customers, who were struggling to reconcile this articulate, authoritative version of Wren with the silent background presence who had refilled their coffee for years. Councilman Warwick stood, straightening his jacket. As town council representative, I should inform you that we've already been in contact with local authorities regarding this child's welfare. If there are jurisdictional concerns— This isn't a jurisdictional matter, Mr. Warwick, Kapoor interrupted without looking at him. This is a matter of national security. The phrase hung in the air like smoke, transforming the atmosphere from tense to surreal. The diner's patrons exchanged bewildered glances, trying to connect the mute boy in the oversized coat to any possible national security concern. Perhaps we should continue this conversation somewhere more private, Wren suggested, her hand resting lightly on Larkin's shoulder. I'm afraid that won't be possible, Kapoor replied. Given the circumstances, full transparency is now our safest option. She turned to address the room at large. I need to ask all of you to remain here until we've completed our initial assessment. My colleagues will take your contact information. Protests immediately erupted from several tables. Millicent stood, her indignation overcoming her shock. This is outrageous! You can't simply detain private citizens during lunch. Actually, she can, Wren said quietly, silencing the room once more. Under National Security Directive 1642, federal agents have authority to temporarily secure civilian witnesses in situations involving classified intelligence breaches. All eyes turned to Wren again. The disconnect between her waitress uniform and her knowledge of obscure security directives creating cognitive dissonance among those who had known her, or thought they had, for years. Kapoor studied Wren with new intensity. You're very well informed for a diner waitress. And you're very public for a counterintelligence operation, Wren countered. Something passed between the women, a professional recognition that further confused the watching customers. Larkin remained frozen beside Wren, his hand now clutching the edge of her apron in a gesture both childlike and desperate. The boy hasn't spoken since the incident at the Meridian Laboratory, Kapoor stated, watching closely for Wren's reaction. He witnessed something he was never meant to see, then disappeared from protective custody during transport. Protective custody, Wren repeated, the slight emphasis suggesting skepticism. His parents were Dr. Ilara Moreau and Dr. Julian Moreau, both civilian contractors working on classified neurological research, Kapoor continued. Their deaths were reported as an accident. But they weren't accidents, Wren concluded, the statement rather than question, confirming she had already pieced this information together. Larkin's grip on her apron tightened, his eyes fixed on the floor. No, Kapoor acknowledged, they weren't. And their son is the only witness to what really happened. The diner had become eerily silent, the regular patrons struggling to process the surreal scene unfolding in their familiar local establishment. The gossip circle sat with mouths slightly agape, their judgment of Wren and Larkin transformed into stunned confusion. Councilman Warwick remained standing, but had retreated slightly, his local authority suddenly diminished in the presence of federal power. Huxley emerged from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a towel with deliberate calm. Seems to me, he said, his gruff voice breaking the tension, that if the boy sought out Wren specifically, there might be a reason worth considering before you haul him off. Kapoor turned her attention to the diner owner. And what makes you think he sought her out specifically, Mr. Barton? Huxley met her gaze steadily. Because in 7 years, I've never seen Wren make a single careless move, and I don't believe for a second that their connection is accidental. The observation hung in the air as all eyes returned to Wren and Larkin. Something in Huxley's assessment had shifted the dynamic, introducing a new possibility that even Kapoor seemed to be considering. Well, Dr. Adler, Kapoor finally said, would you care to explain why a traumatized child with classified information sought you out in a forgotten diner in the middle of nowhere? The use of Dr. Adler sent another shockwave through the diner. Millicent audibly gasped, while Councilman Warwick's expression cycled rapidly through confusion, disbelief, and reassessment. Wren, or Dr. Adler, remained outwardly calm, though something in her posture had shifted, as if a long-maintained disguise was finally being set aside. Perhaps, she replied with quiet dignity, because sometimes the safest place to hide is exactly where no one would think to look for you. The silence that followed Wren's statement was profound, the collective processing of a community suddenly forced to reevaluate someone they had overlooked for years. Millicent's hand covered her mouth in shock, while Councilman Warwick slowly sank back into his seat, his attempted authority deflated. Dr. Ren Adler, Assistant Director Kapoor said, addressing the room now, former head of trauma psychology at Lenox Hill, specialized in pediatric post-traumatic stress, consultant to multiple intelligence agencies on high-stress interrogation ethics and witness protection protocols. She paused, allowing the information to ripple through the stunned diner. Until 3 years ago, when she disappeared after filing whistleblower complaints about unethical research being conducted under government contracts. Larkin looked up at Wren for the first time since the agents had entered, his expression a mixture of fear and confirmation, as if he'd always known who she was, but was afraid of what would happen when others discovered it too. The complaints were buried, Wren said quietly, and the researchers I reported continued their work with full funding and protection. Until 3 weeks ago, Kapoor acknowledged, when 2 of those researchers died under suspicious circumstances, and their son disappeared from a secure facility where he was being held for observation after witnessing their deaths. The pieces were falling into place for everyone listening. The connection between the mute boy and the waitress who had shared her meals with him wasn't random kindness, but something far more complex. You knew who he was from the beginning, Kapoor stated. Wren's expression remained carefully composed. I knew he was a traumatized child who wasn't speaking. I suspected he had experienced something significant. The specifics became clearer over time. Yet you didn't contact authorities. I had good reason not to trust certain authorities, Wren replied. The statement pointed without being accusatory. And Larkin needed time and safety before any kind of disclosure could be ethically pursued. At the sound of his name, Larkin pressed closer to Wren's side. One of Kapoor's colleagues moved slightly forward, and the boy flinched visibly. He chose you, Kapoor realized suddenly. Out of everyone he could have approached, he recognized you from somewhere. Wren nodded slowly. His mother and I were colleagues before I left the field. She supported my ethics complaints privately, but couldn't do so publicly without risking her position. She kept my research in her office, research that might have prevented what eventually happened at Meridian. For the first time, genuine emotion cracked through her composed exterior. If they had listened 3 years ago, Ilara and Julian would still be alive, and Larkin wouldn't be carrying the burden of what he witnessed. The diner's customers watched this exchange with growing understanding. The invisible waitress who had served them for years was actually a physician and researcher of significant standing, who had recognized ethical violations years before they culminated in the deaths that now brought federal agents to their small town. Millicent stood up suddenly, her face flushed with an emotion that seemed caught between embarrassment and indignation. If you're actually a doctor, she demanded, why on earth would you choose to wait tables in Grayson Falls? It makes no sense. The question, so focused on status and appearance even in this moment of revelation, perfectly encapsulated the mindset that had allowed Wren to remain invisible among them for so long. Because Grayson Falls has been without a doctor since the regional medical center closed, Wren replied simply, and people here needed health care more than they needed another waitress. I could provide both. Confused murmurs circulated through the diner until an elderly man at the counter spoke up. She's been treating people, he confirmed. Diabetes management, blood pressure checks, helped my wife through her cancer treatments when we couldn't afford the specialist consultation fees. She diagnosed my daughter's celiac disease when 3 doctors missed it, added a woman near the window. Stitched up my hand last summer when I couldn't miss work for a hospital visit, contributed one of the kitchen staff. One by one, customers and staff shared stories of medical care provided quietly, discreetly, often for nothing more than the cost of supplies. Care given without fanfare or recognition from someone they had barely acknowledged as they ordered their meals. Assistant Director Kapoor absorbed this information with growing comprehension. You've been hiding in plain sight, providing medical care to an underserved community while maintaining a cover identity that kept you below any official radar. She shook her head slightly. Impressive operational security for someone without formal intelligence training. You learn a lot consulting for agencies like yours, Wren replied, including when it's time to disappear. Councilman Warwick had been unusually silent, but now he cleared his throat. I find this all rather hard to believe, he said, though his tone lacked conviction. If Dr. Adler is such a renowned physician, surely someone in town would have recognized her before now. People see what they expect to see, Councilman, Wren responded. And no one expects to find a trauma specialist refilling their coffee. The simple truth of this statement landed heavily in the room. How many times had they looked right through her, assuming her value extended no further than the service she provided? How many conversations had they had about her, around her, as if she weren't fully present or capable of understanding? Kapoor's expression shifted subtly to one of professional respect. Dr. Adler, we need to debrief Larkin as soon as possible. His testimony is crucial to understanding exactly what happened at Meridian and who was responsible. He's not ready to speak, Wren replied firmly. Pushing him before he's psychologically prepared would be both traumatic and counterproductive. We don't have the luxury of waiting. This situation has broader implications than... Kapoor's statement was interrupted by the most unexpected sound, a child's voice, rusty from disuse but clear enough to silence the room instantly. I'll tell you, Larkin said, speaking for the first time since his arrival in Grayson Falls, but only if Dr. Adler stays with me. The simple sentence, the breaking of weeks of silence, carried more impact than any federal badge or authority. Wren knelt down to Larkin's eye level, her focus entirely on him, despite being the center of attention. Are you sure? She asked quietly. You don't have to do this until you're ready. Larkin nodded solemnly. Mom would want me to tell. She said you were the only one who tried to stop it. Kapoor recognized the significance of the moment and approached slowly, kneeling down as well so that she wasn't towering over the child. Larkin, we can arrange for Dr. Adler to be present for any debriefing. Your comfort and safety are important to us. You'll protect her too? The boy asked with unexpected perception. The bad people will come after her when they know she's helping me. The question, so clear-eyed about the dangers involved, reminded everyone that this child had witnessed his parents' murder and understood exactly what was at stake. Yes, Kapoor confirmed without hesitation. Dr. Adler will receive full federal protection, and her previous whistleblower complaints will be reopened as part of our investigation. For the first time, genuine relief showed in Wren's expression, a validation of concerns that had gone unaddressed for years, forcing her into a hidden life to escape potential retaliation. Huxley stepped forward from where he had been, quietly, observing. You always knew this day might come, he said to Wren. It wasn't a question, she nodded. I had hoped it would come through proper channels and ethical investigation, not through more tragedy. She looked at Larkin with genuine sorrow. I never wanted vindication at such a cost. Millicent, who had been uncharacteristically quiet during these revelations, suddenly stood again. I think I speak for everyone when I say we owe you an apology, Dr. Adler, she announced, though the performative nature of her contrition was unmistakable. Had we known about your qualifications and situation? That's just it, Millicent, Wren interrupted gently. You shouldn't have needed to know my qualifications to treat me with basic dignity. The simple statement cut through pretense, landing like a stone in still water. Several customers looked down at their hands or coffee cups, confronting their own behavior in a new, uncomfortable light. Well, Councilman Warwick said, attempting to regain some authority in the situation. Now that we understand Dr. Adler's value to our community, I'm sure we can arrange some sort of official position, perhaps reopen the community clinic with proper funding. The same clinic you voted to close last year because it was fiscally irresponsible? Huxley interrupted. The one Dr. Adler has effectively been running out of this diner while you ignored her? Warwick's face flushed. Circumstances change when new information comes to light. Her value didn't change, Huxley pressed. Your perception of it did. Assistant Director Kapoor, recognizing the situation was evolving into local politics, redirected the conversation. Dr. Adler, we need to move quickly. My team will escort you and Larkin to a secure location where we can begin the debriefing process. Wren nodded, then turned to Huxley. I'm sorry to leave you short-staffed. The diner owner snorted. Pretty sure I can handle a staffing gap, considering the circumstances. His gruff exterior softened slightly. You did good here, Doc. Both kinds of work. As Wren removed her apron, a simple gesture that somehow symbolized the shedding of her cover identity, the diner's patrons watched with new eyes, seeing not just a waitress, but a physician who had served their community in ways they had never recognized. Larkin remained close to her side, his silent vigil transformed now that words had returned to him. As they prepared to leave, Kapoor's agents creating a protective formation around them, he looked back at the diner that had been his safe harbor. "Will we come back?" he asked Wren quietly. She glanced around the space that had been her world for 3 years, at the people who had overlooked her, underestimated her, and occasionally shown her simple kindnesses without ever knowing who she really was. "If it's safe," she replied, "this is still home." The statement, so simple yet profound, completed the transformation of how the diner's occupants viewed her. Not an outsider hiding among them, but someone who had chosen Grayson Falls as her home, despite having options far beyond what most of them could imagine. The next 48 hours passed in a blur of secure facilities, formal debriefings, and medical examinations to ensure Larkin's physical well-being. Throughout it all, Wren remained by his side, providing the psychological anchoring he needed to navigate the overwhelming process. In a conference room at a nondescript government building 2 counties away, Larkin finally told his story. He spoke haltingly at first, then with increasing clarity as Wren guided him through trauma-informed narrative techniques. "Mom and Dad were working on something they called neural mapping," he explained, his small hands wrapped around a cup of hot chocolate that had long since gone cold. "They said it was to help people with brain injuries, but then some new people came to the lab." His account, recorded by Kapoor's team with meticulous care, revealed how the Moreaus had discovered their legitimate medical research was being diverted toward military applications without their knowledge or consent, the neural mapping technology repurposed for something they referred to as cognitive override protocols. "Dad found out they were testing it on people who didn't say yes," Larkin continued, using the simplified language of a child to describe what was clearly non-consensual human experimentation. He and Mom were going to tell someone important, but then the new security people came. What followed was a child's perspective on a deliberate laboratory sabotage disguised as an accident, complete with details that only someone who had been present could have known. Larkin described hiding in a ventilation shaft as instructed by his mother, watching through the grate as men in unmarked tactical gear staged the accident that killed both his parents. "Mom's last words to me were, 'Find Dr. Adler,'" he said, glancing at Wren. "She said you would believe me and know what to do." The debriefing continued for hours, with appropriate breaks and psychological support. By the end, Assistant Director Kapoor had enough information to initiate a major multi-agency investigation into both the deaths of the Moreaus and the unauthorized research that had motivated their murders. "What happens now?" Wren asked as they concluded the final session, her arm protectively around Larkin's shoulders. "Witness protection for both of you," Kapoor replied without hesitation. "New identities, relocation, the full protocol." "I don't want a new life," Larkin said suddenly, his voice stronger than it had been at any point since he started speaking again. "I want justice for my parents." Kapoor studied the boy with newfound respect. "Justice takes time, Larkin, and it requires you to be alive and safe to see it through." "What about my work in Grayson Falls?" Wren asked. "There are patients who depend on me now." "Your safety has to be the priority," Kapoor insisted. "Once we've secured indictments against those responsible, we can reassess the risk levels." Later that evening, as Larkin slept in the adjoining room of their secure temporary housing, Wren and Kapoor spoke more candidly. "Your whistleblower complaints were deliberately buried," Kapoor confirmed, sliding a file folder across the table. "We've already identified 3 officials who intercepted and classified your reports to prevent investigation." Wren opened the folder, her expression hardening as she reviewed the contents. "These are the same people who were overseeing the Meridian Project." "Yes, and they'll be the first ones charged when this case goes public." Kapoor paused, studying Wren carefully. "But there's something else you should know. The research didn't stop with the Moreaus' deaths. If anything, it accelerated. Without ethical oversight." "Without any oversight," Kapoor corrected, "which means what Larkin witnessed isn't just murder, it's evidence of an ongoing black program operating outside legal channels." Wren absorbed this information with the calm assessment of someone accustomed to processing difficult truths. "How high does it go?" "We're still determining that, but high enough to make your continued safety a significant concern." Kapoor hesitated before adding, "and high enough that your return to Grayson Falls may never be possible." The weight of this statement settled between them, the reality of what it meant to leave behind the life Wren had built, humble though it might have appeared to others. Larkin will need stability, Wren said after a moment. A traumatized child needs consistency, not constant relocation. We'll do everything possible to provide that, Kapoor assured her. But I need you to understand the gravity of the situation. The people behind this program have resources and reach that extend into places they shouldn't. Wren nodded, her medical training and intelligence consultant experience giving her a clearer understanding than most of exactly what that meant. When do we leave? Tomorrow morning. New identities will be established before you reach your destination. Kapoor studied her with professional assessment. How are you with the Southwest? We have a location in mind that could use a physician with your qualifications. Another underserved community? A tribal healthcare facility that's been without a full-time doctor for nearly 2 years. Remote enough to maintain security, vital enough to justify federal resources to protect you both. Wren considered this, the prospect of continuing her medical work while maintaining safety for Larkin, offering a potential future that honored both their needs. Larkin will need specialized trauma support, which you're uniquely qualified to provide, along with whatever additional resources we can arrange. The conversation continued into the practical details of their imminent relocation, the mechanics of disappearing from one life and emerging into another. But beneath the logistics lay deeper questions about identity, purpose, and the true nature of community. Questions that would require time and new experiences to fully answer. 6 months later, the Crossroads Diner had changed in subtle but significant ways. A discreet sign now hung beside the entrance. Community Health Services, Tuesdays and Thursdays, 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. The corner booth, where Wren and Larkin had shared quiet meals, was now a small consultation space when needed, easily converted back to dining use during busy hours. Wren Adler, now properly addressed as Dr. Adler by most patrons, still wore an apron 3 days a week, serving food with the same quiet efficiency that had once rendered her nearly invisible. But on clinic days, she wore a simple white coat over practical clothing, providing medical care that had been absent from Grayson Falls since the regional hospital's satellite office closed years earlier. The most remarkable transformation, however, wasn't in the diner's dual purpose or Wren's acknowledged credentials. It was in how the town related to her. The same people who had looked through her for years now greeted her by name, their interactions tinged with a respect that sometimes bordered on deference. Millicent's gossip circles still convened daily, but they now directed their speculative energy toward the positive changes in the community rather than dissecting their neighbors' perceived failings. Councilman Warwick had become an unexpected advocate for the community health services, securing county funding to supplement what had begun as Wren's volunteer effort. His public statements never acknowledged his previous dismissal of her, focusing instead on the partnership between local government and healthcare professionals that was revitalizing Grayson Falls from within. On this particular Tuesday morning, Huxley was handling the breakfast rush alone, while Wren attended to patients in the partitioned section of the diner. The bell above the door chimed as Assistant Director Kapoor entered, now a familiar figure in town due to her monthly visits. "Morning, Huxley," she greeted the diner owner. "Is the doctor available?" "Finishing up with Mrs. Patterson's glucose monitoring," he replied, setting a cup of coffee before her without being asked. "Should be done in about 10 minutes. Kapoor nodded her thanks for both the information and the coffee. During the months since the revelations about Wren's identity and Larkin's experience, she had developed a comfortable rapport with the gruff diner owner who had protected Wren's secret for years. "How's business?" she asked, a casual inquiry that carried deeper meaning between them. "Steady," Huxley replied, their shared code for no security concerns. "Though we get more medical tourists than food tourists these days." This was no exaggeration. Word had spread throughout the region about the exceptional doctor practicing from a diner in Grayson Falls. Patients now drove from neighboring counties for consultations, some waiting hours for the chance to see a physician who took the time to truly listen. When Wren emerged from the consultation area, she looked much as she always had, hair neatly secured, movements efficient, expression composed. Only now the town recognized these traits as the professional demeanor of a highly trained physician, rather than the invisible competence of a waitress. "Indira," she greeted Kapoor warmly. "I wasn't expecting you until next week." "Some developments warranted an earlier visit," Kapoor replied, her tone casual but her eyes conveying the significance of her presence. They moved to a quiet booth at the far end of the diner, away from curious ears. Huxley brought fresh coffee and then strategically positioned himself to discourage any interruptions. "The case is moving forward," Kapoor began once they were settled. "Grand jury indictments were unsealed this morning against 12 individuals involved in the Meridian operation, including the 3 officials who buried your original reports." Ren's composure slipped momentarily, a flash of vindication crossing her features before she regained her professional calm. "And the research program itself? Shut down completely, all data sequestered pending ethical review by an independent medical board." Kapoor paused. "They've requested your participation in that review, given your expertise and early identification of the concerns." "I'd be willing to consult," Ren acknowledged, "though my priority remains here. That's actually the other reason for my visit." Kapoor's expression softened slightly. "We've located Larkin's maternal grandmother. She's been searching for him since his parents' deaths, but was deliberately misinformed about his status. This news clearly affected Ren more deeply than the legal developments. Is she suitable? Safe? Thoroughly vetted. She was estranged from Ilara Moreau over professional disagreements, not personal ones. She's a retired pediatrician living in Vermont, financially secure, and eager to connect with her grandson." Kapoor slid a folder across the table. "Her background check was impeccable, and she's willing to relocate to be near Larkin if that's best for his continued stability." Ren opened the folder, studying its contents with the careful assessment of both a physician and someone who had come to care deeply for the boy who had sought her out in his time of need. "Have you told him yet?" "No, that should come from you. We wanted your evaluation first." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of the subject himself. Larkin entered the diner from the side door that connected to the small apartment above, where he had been living with Ren since their return to Grayson Falls. At 10, soon to be 11, he had transformed from the silent, haunted child who had once watched through windows into a cautiously thriving boy integrated into the local school and community. "Director Kapoor," he greeted her with the formal politeness he reserved for authority figures. "Are there developments?" His vocabulary and directness still occasionally startled those who expected typical 10-year-old behavior, a reminder of both his exceptional intelligence and his unusual experiences. Ren had explained to concerned teachers that trauma often accelerates certain aspects of maturity while delaying others, creating the uneven development they observed in Larkin. "Yes," Kapoor confirmed, "good ones. But why don't you have some breakfast first, and then Dr. Adler can discuss everything with you." Larkin assessed this suggestion with the careful consideration he applied to all decisions, then nodded. "Logical sequencing. I'll have oatmeal with blueberries." Huxley was already preparing the order, having anticipated the boy's arrival and preference. The diner owner had developed an unexpected bond with Larkin, teaching him the fundamentals of short-order cooking as a practical skill that also served as therapeutic activity, structured, creative, and resulting in tangible accomplishment. As Larkin settled at the counter with his breakfast, Ren returned her attention to Kapoor. "The security concerns?" she asked quietly. "Have they been fully addressed?" "All identified conspirators are either in custody or under surveillance," Kapoor assured her. "The risk assessment has been downgraded to minimal. You and Larkin can remain in Grayson Falls permanently if you choose, though we'd maintain periodic check-ins for at least another year." The news settled over Ren like a weight lifting, the provisional nature of their return now solidified into a permanent possibility. For months, she had maintained mental and emotional readiness to relocate at a moment's notice if security concerns warranted. The prospect of true stability felt almost foreign after years of careful vigilance. "And my professional status?" Ren asked, practical as always. "Fully reinstated. Your medical license has been updated to reflect continuous practice, with your work here classified as rural medicine outreach. The medical board was quite impressed by your ingenuity in providing care under such unusual circumstances." Ren absorbed this information with characteristic composure, though the slight relaxing of her shoulders betrayed her relief. "Thank you, Indira. Your support throughout this process has been exceptional." "I'm not the only one impressed by your work," Kapoor replied. "The director has personally reviewed your case file. There's interest in establishing a more formal relationship between the Bureau and your community health service as a pilot program for rural healthcare security. You want to fund the clinic? We want to learn from it, Kapoor clarified. And yes, provide resources to expand its capacity. The model you've created here, integrating healthcare into an existing community fixture, rather than imposing an institutional structure, has applications beyond Grayson Falls. The conversation paused as the diner's front door opened, admitting Councilman Warwick and a woman neither Wren nor Kapoor recognized. The newcomer carried herself with the confident authority of someone accustomed to professional respect, her attire and demeanor suggesting she wasn't a local. "Dr. Adler," Warwick called out with the forced joviality he had adopted since the revelations about Wren's identity. "May I introduce Dr. Verity Hammond from the State Department of Health? She's here about the rural medicine initiative we discussed." Wren rose to greet the visitor, exchanging professional courtesies while Kapoor observed with subtle assessment. Once introductions were complete, including Kapoor's federal credentials, Dr. Hammond came directly to the point. "Your work here is remarkable, Dr. Adler," she said, "particularly given the constraints and lack of formal support. The state is interested in using Grayson Falls as a case study for addressing healthcare deserts in rural communities." "I appreciate the interest," Wren replied cautiously, "though I should note that our current arrangement evolved organically to meet specific local needs. It may not translate directly to other communities." "That's precisely what makes it valuable," Hammond countered. "Cookie-cutter solutions have failed repeatedly. We're looking for adaptive models that respond to community-specific factors." As the discussion continued, Larkin finished his breakfast and brought his dishes to the kitchen counter, where Huxley wordlessly exchanged them for a glass of milk and the day's math homework that needed checking. The domestic normalcy of this interaction stood in stark contrast to the high-level policy discussion happening mere feet away, a juxtaposition that captured the unique duality of their lives in Grayson Falls. Eventually, the conversation with Dr. Hammond concluded with plans for a more formal assessment of the diner clinic model. As Warwick escorted the state official out, Wren returned to the booth where Kapoor waited. "Quite a change from serving coffee to the councilman while being completely ignored," Kapoor observed. "The coffee was still good even when he ignored me," Wren replied with the hint of a smile. "Though I admit, having my professional opinion solicited rather than dismissed is a welcome development." They both glanced toward Larkin, who was now assisting an elderly regular to his usual seat by the window, demonstrating the blend of compassion and practical support that characterized his interactions with the diner's patrons. "He's healing," Kapoor noted. "Day by day," Wren confirmed. "Though the process isn't linear, he still has nightmares, still struggles with trusting new authority figures. But he's developing healthy attachments and appropriate boundaries. And his long-term prospects? Promising with continued support." Wren's clinical assessment softened as she watched the boy return to his homework. "He has exceptional resilience, and now he has stability as well." The conversation turned to the practicalities of introducing Larkin to his grandmother, a process Wren insisted must be gradual and carefully managed to avoid disrupting his hard-won sense of security. Kapoor agreed, arranging for an initial video call followed by a supervised visit before any discussions of potential changes to living arrangements. "She doesn't want to replace you," Kapoor assured Wren. "From our conversations, she seems to understand the bond you've formed and its importance to Larkin's well-being. She's expressed interest in relocating to Grayson Falls, at least part-time, to allow for a relationship that doesn't disrupt his current support system." This considerate approach relieved one of Wren's primary concerns, that Larkin might face another abrupt transition, just as he was finding stability. While she had always known their arrangement might be temporary, the prospect of maintaining connection while introducing healthy family relationships represented an ideal outcome she hadn't dared hope for. As the morning progressed, the diner's dual functions unfolded with practiced coordination. Huxley managed the breakfast service while Wren consulted with scheduled patients in the partitioned area. Kapoor departed with promises to return the following week, with more detailed arrangements for Larkin's grandmother's initial visit. By mid-afternoon, the lunch rush had subsided, and Wren emerged from her final consultation of the day to find Millicent waiting near the counter. Unlike her previous imperious demeanor, the woman now appeared genuinely contrite. "Dr. Adler," she began hesitantly, "I was hoping I might have a moment of your time." Wren gestured toward an empty booth. Of course, Millicent. What can I help you with? They settled across from each other, the dynamics between them fundamentally altered from their years of interactions as patron and waitress. I've been wanting to speak with you privately, Millicent said, her usual confidence subdued. About the way I treated you before we knew who you really were. That's not necessary, Wren replied gently. We all play roles in our communities. But that's just it, Millicent persisted. I've been thinking about that ever since you said we shouldn't need to know your qualifications to treat you with dignity. And you were right. She paused, gathering her thoughts. I've prided myself on being a pillar of this community, yet I completely failed to recognize the most valuable person among us because she was wearing an apron instead of a white coat. The self-awareness in this admission surprised Wren, who had expected Millicent's initial contrition to fade once the novelty of her revealed identity wore off. We all have blind spots, Wren offered. What matters is how we respond when they're revealed to us. That's why I'm here, Millicent continued. I want to help with the community health initiative, not as a medical professional, obviously, but as a coordinator. I know everyone in this town, their circumstances, their needs. I could help connect people who might be reluctant to seek care directly. The proposal was unexpected but not unwelcome. Millicent's extensive social network and organizational skills could indeed be valuable assets to the growing health services program. That's a generous offer, Wren acknowledged, and one with genuine potential benefit. Perhaps we could start with a focus on the elderly residents who have transportation limitations. As they discussed the practicalities of this collaboration, Wren reflected on the transformation that had occurred, not just in how others perceived her, but in how the community perceived itself. The revelation of her identity had challenged assumptions about value and worth that extended far beyond her personal situation, creating space for people like Millicent to reconsider their own roles and potential contributions. Later that evening, after the diner had closed and Huxley had departed, Wren sat with Larkin in their customary corner booth, now the setting for their nightly check-in conversations, rather than secretive shared meals. The boy was methodically working through a piece of cherry pie, while Wren sipped tea, their comfortable silence a testament to the security they had established together. Director Kapoor said there were developments, Larkin finally said, his direct approach to communication unchanged despite his progress in other areas of social interaction. About my parents' case? Yes, Wren confirmed, choosing her words carefully. The people responsible for what happened are being charged formally. Justice is moving forward. Larkin nodded, processing this information with the same thoughtful deliberation he applied to all significant matters. That's good. Mom and Dad would want that. There's something else, Wren continued. Something potentially very positive. We found your grandmother, your mother's mother. She's been looking for you since your parents died. The boy's fork paused midway to his mouth, his expression shifting through multiple emotions before settling into cautious curiosity. I didn't know I had a grandmother. Mom never talked about her family. They had some disagreements about work, Wren explained. But from everything we've learned, she cared deeply about your mother, and now she very much wants to know you. Would I have to leave? The question came quickly, revealing the core fear beneath his composed exterior. No, Wren assured him immediately. That's not the plan at all. She's actually interested in moving closer to us, so you can build a relationship gradually while maintaining the stability you have here. This reassurance visibly relieved the tension in his small shoulders. Would she live with us? We would figure that out together, based on what feels right for everyone, Wren explained. But no changes would happen without your input and comfort. Larkin considered this, his analytical mind working through the implications. Would she be like family for both of us? The question caught Wren off guard, a reminder that despite his intelligence and unusual maturity in some areas, he was still a child seeking to understand how relationships and belonging worked. She would be your biological family, Wren replied carefully, and potentially part of our chosen family, which we've built here together. With Huxley and some of the regular customers, and my teachers who know the truth, Larkin specified, cataloging the support network they had carefully constructed. Exactly, Wren confirmed. Family is both who we're born to and who we choose. Sometimes we're fortunate enough to have both. Larkin nodded, satisfied with this framework for understanding the potential new relationship. I'd like to meet her, but I still want to live here, With you. This is our home, Wren assured him, the simple statement encompassing all that they had built together in Grayson Falls. Later, after Larkin had gone to bed, Wren stood at the diner's front window, looking out at the quiet main street of the town that had become her sanctuary. The path that had brought her here, from distinguished medical career to whistleblower to hidden waitress to acknowledged physician, was not one she could have anticipated or chosen. Yet standing in the gentle quiet of the diner that had been her cover and was now her clinic, she recognized that sometimes the most meaningful purpose emerges not from careful planning, but from responding with integrity to the circumstances life presents. The community that had once looked through her now saw her clearly, not just for her credentials, but for her consistent care, offered without recognition when she was believed to be just a waitress, and continued with the same dedication now that she was known as Dr. Adler. The revelation of her identity had changed how others perceived her, but it hadn't changed who she fundamentally was or the work she was committed to doing. In the morning, she would once again wear her apron and serve breakfast to the early crowd before changing into her white coat for clinic hours. The duality that had once been her cover story had become her chosen reality, a life that honored both her medical calling and the community connection she had found in the most unlikely of places. And when Larkin came downstairs to help with the morning prep work, as had become their routine, she would begin the careful process of helping him integrate this new possibility of extended family into his gradually healing world. Together, they would continue building the security and belonging that had begun with the simple act of a waitress sharing meals, with a silent child who needed more than food. Have you ever known someone who never asked for recognition but deserved more than anyone else? Share your story in the comments below, and subscribe to see more moments when extraordinary people are finally seen for who they truly are.